"Get off the damn sidewalk, monkey," Tyler spat, his voice dripping with cruelty. The words struck Amara like stones, making her flinch before she could even react. His friends Brandon and Mike snickered behind him, nudging each other as if the insult were some kind of joke. Amara hugged her backpack tighter and kept walking toward the apartment stairwell. She'd learned to stay quiet, learned to pretend the comments didn't hurt. But today, Tyler followed her, stepping in front of the stairs so she couldn't pass. "And where you think you're going, huh?" he sneered. "Back to that run-a-down place you call home? Bet your mama's inside ironing scrubs like some good little maid." Something in Amara snapped. "Don't talk about my mom like that," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "She helps people every night at the hospital." Tyler's expression soured instantly. "What'd you say to me?" He stepped closer. "Say it again." Amara swallowed, but the anger inside her held steady. "I said stop talking about my mom." Brandon snorted. "Yo, she's got an attitude." Tyler's lips curled into a cold smile. Not for long. He shoved her hard. Amara lost her footing. Her arms flailed. For a split second, she seemed to hover above the stairs before gravity yanked her downward. Her body tumbled, hitting each concrete step with a sickening series of thuds. Then came the crack, a sharp, terrible snap that echoed through the stairwell. Her scream followed raw, piercing, the kind of sound that tears through bone and soul alike. She landed at the bottom, her leg twisted unnaturally, her white sock already blooming red. Tyler froze. Even he hadn't expected that. Brandon whispered, "Dude, she's bleeding." "Shut up," Tyler hissed. "Run." They bolted, disappearing around the building as Amara's sobs filled the air. Inside the apartment, Danielle dropped her grocery bags the moment she heard the scream. She burst out of the doorway and screamed her daughter's name. "Amara." She sprinted toward the stairs, her breath breaking, her hands shaking. Seeing Amara crumpled at the bottom, Danielle's vision blurred. She nearly tripped racing down the steps. "Baby, baby, look at mama. Look at me." Danielle knelt beside her, her voice trembling. "Oh God. Your leg, Amara. Your leg. It hurts, mama," Amara wailed, clutching Danielle's shirt with trembling fingers. "Please make it stop, mama, please." Danielle fumbled for her phone. She called 911, voice cracking on every word. "My daughter, she fell. Her leg is broken. She's bleeding. Please hurry. Please." The dispatcher said help was coming, but minutes passed. Too many minutes. Amara was screaming, sobbing, shaking. Danielle tried to comfort her but felt herself unraveling with each second. Her baby was in agony. Help wasn't arriving. So she did the only desperate thing her mind could grasp. She ran into the street. She stood directly in the road, waving her arms wildly as a line of motorcycles approached from the curve. "Please, somebody help us," she screamed. The bikers braked so suddenly their tires screeched. One nearly hit her close enough she felt the heat from the engine brush her legs. Danielle stumbled backward, terrified, almost falling to the pavement. The men on the motorcycles stiffened, staring at her, some confused, some startled. For a second, she thought she'd made a horrible mistake. Everything she'd ever heard about bikers, dangerous, reckless, violent, flashed through her mind. I'm sorry," she gasped. "Please, I didn't mean to. My daughter, she's hurt, she's really hurt. Please, please help." Her voice cracked. She covered her face, shaking. Behind her, Amara's screams rose again, high, panicked, unbearable. "Mama, mama, la." Danielle's knees buckled. She collapsed right there in the street. I can't do this. I can't, please someone help her." Silence took the bikers for a long, heavy breath. Then their engines cut off. 4 men climbed off their motorcycles, slowly, cautiously, like approaching a wounded animal. Their leader removed his helmet. Duke, tall and broad-shouldered, with silvering hair and a scar across his jaw. He looked at Danielle, then he looked past her, toward the stairwell where a little girl lay sobbing in pain. His expression softened, just slightly, but enough. "Ma'am," Duke said, his voice steady, low, calm. "Where is she?" Danielle pointed with a trembling hand. "Please, she's bleeding her leg. She can't. She's so scared." Duke nodded once. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a quiet, resolute acknowledgement. 2 bikers rushed to the bottom of the stairs. keeping a respectful distance from Amara but checking the area for danger. Without a word, Duke signaled to the others. "Help me get her," he said, already dismounting. Two others rushed forward, careful hands lifting Amara onto a makeshift stretcher from the back of one of their bikes. Danielle climbed into the sidecar of the lead rider's Harley, holding her daughter's hand the whole way. "Hold tight," Duke said, and they flew. The ride to the hospital was a blur of wind. Sirens in the distance. Amara's whimpers barely heard over the roar of the engines. Danielle pressed her forehead to Amara's and whispered every prayer she could remember. When they arrived, Duke kicked the side stand and helped carry Amara inside. Nurses rushed forward. Danielle shouted her daughter's name, her voice breaking as they wheeled the little girl away. "Thank you," she whispered to the biker as the ER doors swung shut. He nodded once. No kid should scream like that. He turned, walked out, and disappeared before she could say another word. At the hospital, X-rays confirmed a clean but severe fracture. Surgery, months of rehab, crutches, pain, fear. Danielle sat at her daughter's side all night, watching her sleep, guilt wrapped around her like chains. The next morning, just after sunrise, she stepped outside their small home on Mason Street for air. She found something on the doormat, a teddy bear, a bouquet of wildflowers, and a plain white envelope. Inside, 3 names, typed: Tyler, Brandon, Mike. No threats, no explanation, just truth. And down the street, barely audible in the early morning hush, a low growl of a motorcycle engine rumbled and faded into the horizon. If this story moved you, tap like and comment where you're watching from. Maybe someone nearby is watching too. Daniela didn't sleep. Even after the hospital confirmed that Amara was stable, after the surgery was scheduled, after the nurses reassured her again and again, she couldn't rest. Her daughter, her baby, had screamed in her arms and now lay unconscious in a hospital bed, her legs suspended and wrapped in gauze and plastic tubing. The image looped endlessly in Danielle's mind, the sound of Amara's body tumbling down the stairs, the blood blooming on that innocent white sock, the twisted angle of her little leg, and the sound of that motorcycle. She couldn't forget that either. Duke. That was what the nurse had called him after he carried Amara inside. Like she weighed nothing, his heavy boots echoing down the tile hallway. He didn't fill out any paperwork. Didn't wait for thanks. Just turned and walked back out through the automatic glass doors. No swagger, no smirk, just silence. By the time Danielle looked up from the triage counter, he was gone. Back home, early the next morning, the house felt hollow without Amara. The silence wasn't peaceful, it pressed in on her, thick with guilt and grief. The plastic bag from the hospital sat untouched on the counter, containing Amara's ripped jeans and that bloodied sock. Danielle hadn't had the courage to throw them away. She stepped outside barefoot, arms crossed tightly around herself against the morning chill. That's when she saw it. The teddy bear sat upright on the welcome mat, its button eye slightly loose. Tucked behind its ear was a bundle of wildflowers, purple clover, yellow daisies, a few sprigs of pine. It wasn't from any store. These had been picked, gathered, arranged by hand. Danielle's breath caught in her throat. Then she saw the envelope. Plain, white, sealed. She knelt slowly, hands trembling, and picked it up. No name on the front. No note inside, just a single sheet of paper with 3 names typed neatly in black ink. Tyler, Brandon, Mike. The names hit her like a punch to the gut. She hadn't known them. The police hadn't cared to ask. But someone did. She looked up and down the street. Empty. Still. Then she stepped back inside, locking the door behind her. The names burned a hole in her thoughts. Those boys had pushed her daughter, called her horrible things, left her broken on the pavement like she didn't matter. And someone who didn't owe her anything had tracked them down within a day. She didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Later that morning, the neighborhood began to stir. Engines rumbled to life. Dogs barked. The world pretended to move on. But Danielle couldn't. She stepped outside again, clutching the envelope in her hand like it might offer answers if she held it tight enough. Mrs. Hathaway, her elderly neighbor from across the street, was watering her petunias. "Morning, Danielle," she called, her eyes dropping briefly to the envelope. How's your little one? In surgery this afternoon, Danielle replied, voice tight. Mrs. Hathaway hesitated, then said softly, I heard the angels brought you in. Danielle's jaw tightened. Yeah, they did. Well, some folks might judge them for the jackets and the noise, but I remember the tornado back in '97. They were the only ones pulling trees off roofs and delivering water while the city waited on FEMA. Don't forget that. Danielle didn't answer, not because she disagreed, but because the words stuck in her throat. By noon, the whispers had begun. She could hear them at the corner store when she picked up ginger ale and crackers for the hospital. Did you see all that chrome yesterday? I heard one of them nearly ran her over before helping. Lucky she didn't get herself killed. Why would they help her? She's not one of them. But the store clerk, a grizzled man named Larry, leaned over the counter and whispered, Don't listen to him. Good men come in loud machines sometimes. Danielle nodded numbly. She wasn't used to being noticed, being watched, and she certainly wasn't used to biker gangs dropping off flowers and teddy bears like guardian angels from some parallel world. Later that day, after visiting Amara, who was still drowsy but out of danger, Danielle returned home and did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed, not for justice, not for revenge, but for clarity. What did it mean? This unexpected help from men she'd been taught to fear. What did they want? That night, the answer didn't come. But just before she went to bed, she heard the sound again. Low, steady, familiar. A single motorcycle engine, somewhere down Mason Street. Not stopping, just passing by. But somehow, she knew it was for her. Danielle stood at the edge of the hospital bed, watching the slow rise and fall of Amara's chest. Her daughter's eyes fluttered open, barely able to focus. Mama, she whispered, her voice raspy. My leg. I know, baby, Danielle said softly, brushing back a curl from Amara's damp forehead. You're okay. You're safe. It hurts. I know it does. Danielle pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead, swallowing the knot in her throat. But you're strong. Stronger than you know. Amara blinked slowly, then asked, Did you catch him? Danielle froze. Her daughter's innocence cut deeper than any blade. No, she said gently, but I know who it was now. Amara turned her head slightly. Was it Tyler? Danielle's eyebrows lifted. You knew his name? Amara nodded slowly. He calls me things at school. Bad names. I didn't tell you. I didn't want to make it worse. Danielle closed her eyes, her heart squeezing tight. All this time, her daughter had been carrying that pain alone. She opened her purse and reached for the envelope. She hadn't told Amara yet, but now, it seemed right. Someone left this for us. On the porch, the morning after, she opened the envelope and showed Amara the names. Amara looked at them in silence. Her lip trembled slightly. That's them, she whispered. Danielle sat back in the plastic hospital chair, the envelope still in her lap. It had weight now, moral weight, emotional weight. It wasn't just paper and ink. It was the truth. And now that the truth was known, it had to be carried somewhere. But where? To the police? They had ignored her first call, took hours to show up, then did little more than file a report. No arrests, no questions, no follow-up. To the school? She knew how those meetings went. Apologies, excuses. Boys will be boys, warnings with no bite. To the boys' parents? That would be a waste of breath. Their silence was complicity. Danielle tapped her fingers on the edge of the envelope, her eyes unfocused. There was only one direction the names could go now. Back to the source. To the men in leather jackets and denim vests. The ones who left gifts and vanished before dawn. The ones she'd been taught to avoid. The ones who didn't blink when blood was involved. The Hells Angels. She didn't have a phone number, didn't know where they stayed or where they gathered, but she knew how they sounded. She knew what thunder on wheels felt like when it rolled into her neighborhood. Danielle stood slowly, kissed Amara on the forehead, and whispered, I'll be back soon. You rest, okay? Amara nodded, eyes already drifting closed again. Danielle clutched the envelope and walked out of the hospital with the sun hot on her shoulders and something colder stirring in her chest. By the time she got home, the house felt smaller than usual, too quiet, too still. She placed the envelope on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. Then, in a moment that felt more like instinct than decision, She slipped on her sneakers, grabbed her keys, and walked out the front door. She didn't know where she was going, only that she was looking for a sound. She started with the edge of town, industrial areas, back lots, old garages. Her gut told her they wouldn't be far. A presence like that doesn't disappear. It just waits until the next reason to move. Finally, after nearly an hour of driving, she heard it. The low grumble. A cluster of motorcycles sat parked outside a rusted warehouse on the outskirts of a storage yard. No signs, no names, just bikes, oil stains, a dented vending machine, and music low, bluesy, played from an open bay door. Danielle hesitated in her car, gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned pale. This was insane. What was she doing here? But then she saw him, Duke, leaning against a stack of tires, arms crossed, sunglasses shading his eyes. He looked like a storm paused in human form. Danielle got out. As soon as her feet hit the gravel, every head turned. Conversation stopped. Engines idled. One man halfway through lifting a beer froze mid-motion. She walked straight toward Duke. He didn't move, didn't speak. Danielle stopped a few feet away, lifted the envelope, and held it out. "You left this," she said. A beat passed. Then Duke pushed off the tires and stepped forward. He took the envelope, glanced at it, and nodded once. "Yeah. Why?" He studied her for a moment, as if deciding whether to answer with words or silence. Finally, he said, "Because no one else was going to." Danielle looked down. Her voice cracked when she spoke again. "I don't know what you are, what people say you are, but thank you for getting my daughter to the hospital, for caring." Duke shrugged slightly. "We don't do it for thank yous." "I figured." Another pause. Then Danielle asked the question that had haunted her all night. "What are you going to do with those names?" Duke looked at her carefully. "What do you want us to do?" The air went still. She hadn't expected that. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Her throat tightened. "I want them to understand. I want them to feel something. Guilt. Shame. Fear. I don't know, but I don't want them to hurt someone else." Duke nodded once, a slow, heavy movement. "Fair enough." Then he tucked the envelope into his back pocket. "They'll feel it," he said. "Not a threat, not a promise. Just a fact." Danielle exhaled, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Then she turned and walked back to her car. And for the first time since the fall, she didn't feel entirely alone. Danielle sat in the hospital's family waiting room, arms folded tightly, her foot tapping a silent rhythm against the tile floor. She had never felt more exhausted, and yet her mind refused to slow down. Amara was out of surgery now. The doctors said it went well. Plates, screws, terms that didn't belong in a child's file but were now etched into her daughter's medical chart forever. Her baby had metal in her leg. That thought alone sent a chill through her spine. She glanced at the clock. 9:03 a.m. Visiting hours hadn't technically started, but the nurses had told her she could sneak in early. "You're her mom," they'd said gently, as if she needed reminding. But Danielle didn't move. Not yet. Her thoughts were still stuck in the warehouse from yesterday, the weight of Duke's question still lingering like the scent of oil and engine grease. "What do you want us to do?" She hadn't had an answer then. She barely had one now. Justice? Retribution? She didn't even know what those words meant anymore, not when the world had let her daughter lie bleeding for 10 minutes before anyone did a thing. She was startled by the nurse's voice at the door. "She's asking for you." Danielle stood quickly. Inside the room, Amara lay propped up by pillows, her left leg wrapped thickly and elevated by a sling and padded foam. The TV was on low cartoons, but she wasn't watching. Her gaze lit up as soon as Danielle entered. "Mama." She smiled sleepily. Danielle leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Hey, sweetheart." "I don't like the hospital," Amara said softly. "I don't like it either," Danielle whispered back, trying to keep her voice light. "But guess what? You're the toughest girl on this floor." "Am I?" "Mm-hmm." She gave her daughter a playful grin. "You survived falling downstairs, being brave, and riding in a motorcycle sidecar, all in the same day." Amara's eyes widened. "That was real?" Danielle nodded, laughing softly. That was very real. Amara was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Is the man with the silver hair coming back?" Danielle paused. "I don't know. I liked him," Amara said. "He didn't say much, but he looked like he wanted to." Danielle didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and held her daughter's hand. Later that afternoon, Danielle returned home briefly to pick up clothes and food. As she turned onto Mason Street, she noticed something odd. Her front yard, normally plain and patchy, was different. There was a new wooden ramp. It sloped gently from her porch down to the sidewalk. Solidly built, wide, cleanly sanded. No note. No knocking. Just there. Her breath caught. She dropped her bag on the porch and walked up the ramp slowly, her shoes thudding softly against the new boards. She knelt down, ran her fingers along the edges. No nails sticking out, no splinters. It was professionally made, and no one in the neighborhood had done it. The whisper started 2 doors down. Mrs. Gibbs, an elderly widow known for her binoculars and 2 cats, leaned slightly out her screen door. "They were here early," she said without being asked. "Before sunrise. Didn't even wake the dogs." Danielle blinked. "Who?" Mrs. Gibbs gave her a look. "The same men who brought your girl in." Danielle exhaled slowly. She didn't know what surprised her more, that they built the ramp, or that they didn't stick around to be seen. By the time Danielle got back to the hospital, she found something else waiting. Books. 3 of them children's chapter books stacked neatly beside Amara's tray table, along with a small notebook and a box of colored pencils. Amara grinned when her mom walked in. "Look what the biker people left." Danielle walked over and gently lifted one of the books. Inside the front cover, in neat but scratchy handwriting, were the words, "To Amara, the bravest writer we know. Sasha, Duke's daughter." Danielle sat down slowly, holding the book like it might dissolve. "They just came?" Amara nodded. "They knocked. Mama. They were really nice. The one with red hair said he had a daughter who used to be in the hospital a lot, too. They said they were just stopping by." Danielle rubbed her temples. This was not what she expected. Not intimidation. Not vengeance. Not chaos. Help. Kindness. And for some, that was even more disruptive, because the whispers were louder now. At the grocery store, people lingered near the dairy aisle a little too long. At the gas station, 2 men leaned against a truck and stopped talking when she pulled up. No one said it to her face, but she knew what they thought. Why would those men care? Why would she let them? Danielle didn't owe them an explanation. She didn't need approval, but part of her still flinched decades of learned survival instincts didn't vanish overnight. Back in Amara's room, she found her daughter asleep again, one hand resting on the box of colored pencils. Danielle sat beside her, pulled the blanket up to her chest, and whispered, "Sleep, baby girl. You've got people watching now." And far away, in a quiet garage at the edge of town, Duke sat sharpening a pocket knife, listening to blues on an old radio, and thinking about a girl in a hospital bed who had stared up at him with more courage than most men he knew. It started with a letter, folded and tucked into Danielle's mailbox, sealed in a plain envelope with no return address. She found it the morning after the ramp appeared, just as she was about to leave for the hospital. No handwriting on the outside, just her name typed cleanly on a small white label. Inside, one line, "People like you bring them into our town. Don't be surprised when someone else's kid gets hurt next time." No signature. Danielle read it twice, then a 3rd time. Each time, it stung deeper. She folded the letter slowly and placed it in her purse without a word. She didn't want Amara to see it. Didn't want her to know that while she was recovering, the world outside was starting to rot in its own silence. Later that day, as she walked Amara through her first round of in-bed exercises with a physical therapist, she tried to keep her tone light, encouraging, but her stomach was knotted with worry. Amara winced as she lifted her leg barely an inch. "You're doing amazing," Danielle said, holding her hand. "Just a little more, baby." "Well, it feels heavy," Amara said, tears gathering in her lashes. "Like someone poured bricks in it." Danielle gave her a shaky smile. "Then every inch you move is a miracle." After the session, Amara asked for her book, the one with Sasha's note. Danielle handed it to her, then stepped into the hallway for air. But as soon as she turned the corner, she saw them. 3 men in leather jackets, sitting quietly in the hospital cafeteria. Duke was one of them. The others she recognized only vaguely, faces she'd seen for seconds during chaos. They weren't talking loudly. They weren't looking for attention. They were just there, drinking coffee, watching the door. Danielle approached slowly. Duke saw her first. He nodded, then stood. The others followed. "Didn't mean to make a scene," Duke said calmly. "You didn't," Danielle replied. "But people are talking. We figured they would." She took a breath. "They're not happy." Duke glanced back at the table. "Some people mistake silence for peace. They think when no one says anything, everything's fine. But all that silence has been covering up a lot of pain." Danielle met his eyes. "You're not wrong." "Then let them talk," he said. "We're not here to fight. We're here to finish what someone else started." "And what exactly is that?" Duke held her gaze. "Standing between your daughter and the kind of people who think they can shove a child down concrete stairs and walk away like it never happened." Danielle nodded slowly. "That's what I want too." "Then we're on the same page." As Duke turned to leave, he paused. "There's a charity ride next week," he said without looking back. "We're riding for her, for Amara, and for every other kid who got told to shut up when they were hurting." Daniela blinked. "A ride? Through town? Pink ribbons on the bikes. Donations to a new anti-bullying program. We've already talked to the mayor's office. Quiet approval. No publicity." "You're organizing all this?" Duke shrugged. "We're not politicians, but we know how to move people." Then he was gone. The whispers changed tone after that. Some grew louder, more venomous. Others softened. At the school, one teacher pulled Danielle aside. "I shouldn't say this, but my nephew's in the same class as Amara. He saw it. Everything. And no one did a damn thing. Not even me." Thank God someone finally stood up. At the grocery store, an older woman quietly handed Danielle a bag of oranges and wouldn't let her pay. "For her," she said, "and for you, for not backing down." Still, the letter in Danielle's purse weighed heavier than any kindness. By the time she brought Amara home a week later, the ramp was polished and sturdy. A small garden had been planted near the base, wildflowers again. Someone had left a sign in front of the porch. "Welcome home, little rider." Danielle touched the sign with her fingertips. Inside, Amara lit up as soon as she saw it. "Mama, they planted flowers. Did the biker people do that?" "I think so," Danielle said. Amara grinned, her whole face glowing. "I like them." "No." That night, as Danielle tucked her daughter into her own bed for the first time in weeks, she watched her drift off to sleep with the teddy bear still in her arms. The house smelled like home again, old pine floors, fresh sheets, and the distant scent of wildflowers through the open window. Then she heard it, the low, rolling thunder of engines, this time more than one. She stepped onto the porch. 8 bikes rolled slowly down Mason Street, headlights low, ribbons tied to antennas, silent in formation. They didn't stop. They didn't wave. They just passed, steady and sure, their presence, a signal in itself. And for the first time, Danielle didn't see them as a threat. She saw them as a wall between her daughter and the darkness. 2 days after Amara came home, the front porch became a new kind of sanctuary. Neighbors passed by and waved now, some hesitantly, some with a little too much enthusiasm, as if trying to prove they were on the right side of things. Others still crossed the street to avoid eye contact. Danielle noticed it all, and yet, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to explain herself. Amara spent much of the morning drawing with the colored pencils left behind by the bikers. Her cast was now decorated with hand-drawn butterflies, stars, and a lopsided motorcycle with flames that stretched all the way to her knee. She grinned as she showed Danielle. "Look, I gave Duke's bike wings." Danielle laughed, brushing a lock of hair from her daughter's forehead. "I think he'd like that." "He doesn't talk much," Amara said thoughtfully, "but when he does, it feels important." Danielle nodded. "He says a lot even when he's quiet." "No." That afternoon, the rumble returned, not dozens, just one. Danielle recognized it before the engine even rounded the corner. A low, familiar growl, followed by the clink of metal against asphalt. She stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her jeans just as Duke's bike came to a stop at the curb. He didn't get off immediately. He simply sat there for a moment, looking up at the house, then cut the engine and dismounted. Danielle walked down the ramp to meet him. "Afternoon," Duke said, adjusting the cuff of his worn denim vest. His sunglasses reflected the midday Sunday. "Afternoon," Danielle replied, then gestured toward the sign near the flowers. "The Little Rider plaque. That you?" He gave a faint shrug. "Let's just say it came from our side." Danielle smiled. It meant a lot to her. "She's been sleeping with the bear every night." Duke nodded. "She's tougher than most grown men I know." There was a pause. Danielle cleared her throat. "You said there's a ride coming up?" "Saturday," Duke confirmed. "We're keeping it quiet. No press, no media circus. Just people who want to show up, ride through town, and remind folks what standing together looks like." Danielle glanced toward the house. "And it's for her?" "It's for her," he said. "But it's also for every other kid who doesn't have someone to yell for help. For the ones who get told to just toughen up. For the ones like my niece." Danielle looked up. "You never mentioned her before." "She was 12, he said, his voice low. "Bullied at school. Teachers did nothing." She stopped talking. Then one day, she just stopped. Silence stretched between them. "I'm sorry," Danielle said. Duke gave a curt nod, then reached into his vest and handed Danielle a folded flyer. It was printed on plain white paper with black ink. "Ride for Respect. This Saturday, 9 a.m., through Mason Street. Pink ribbons. No noise, no anger, just presence." Danielle studied the paper. "You don't want a crowd?" "We want witnesses," Duke said. "Not a show." He mounted his bike again, then looked back. "We'll ride past here, won't stop, but she'll see us." Then he kicked the engine to life, tipped his helmet toward her, and rolled off. Word spread, despite their best efforts. By Friday, people were already lining sidewalks, some with fold-out chairs, some with nervous eyes. Kids with cell phones talked in hushed tones at the bus stop. One mother whispered to another outside the grocery store, "I heard they're bringing riders from other states." Even Danielle's boss at the clinic asked her quietly, "Are you okay with all this?" Danielle had looked her straight in the eye. "I'm more okay now than I've been in years." That night, she helped Amara paint her face with a little pink heart. "Do I look strong?" Amara asked. "You've never looked stronger." At dawn the next morning, Mason Street felt like it was holding its breath. Danielle wheeled Amara onto the porch, a light blanket tucked around her legs. The sun had barely risen, but the scent of fresh coffee and dew-soaked earth made the morning feel alive. Then they heard it. The sound didn't come all at once. It started with a faint, distant hum, then grew into a rumble that made the windows tremble. Dozens of bikes. Not roaring, not aggressive. Steady, unified. They turned onto Mason Street slowly, each rider wearing a pink ribbon tied to their handlebars or stitched onto their jackets. They rode in silence, engines throttled low, faces calm and unreadable. Some waved gently, others simply nodded. Danielle's throat tightened. Amara's eyes widened. "There's so many." "Yeah, baby, there are." They watched as more bikes rolled past, some older riders with gray beards, some young women with tattoos and pink bandanas. One rider had a large plush butterfly strapped to the back of his seat. Danielle spotted Duke near the center of the pack, riding as steady as ever, his silver hair trailing just beneath his helmet. As he passed, he lifted 2 fingers to his brow in a subtle salute just for them. Amara saluted back. It only lasted 10 minutes, but it changed everything. When the last bike rolled past and the engines faded into the horizon, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Neighbors stepped out of their houses, blinking as if waking up from a long sleep. Someone started clapping, then another, and another. Danielle held Amara close. "They saw you," she whispered. Amara smiled, eyes glistening. "I saw them too." The town didn't go back to normal. Not exactly. By Monday morning, the chalk drawings on the sidewalk from where the bikers passed were still there: hearts, butterflies, "Ride for Amara." written in curly handwriting. Pink ribbons fluttered from a few mailboxes like leftover echoes. People who once avoided eye contact with Danielle now stopped her at the grocery store with awkward nods and muttered words of respect. Some handed her envelopes, donations, hand-drawn cards, even one note that simply said, "I'm sorry for what we didn't do." But not everyone was pleased. At the post office, a man in a button-down shirt and church shoes scoffed as Danielle passed. "This town's gone soft," he said, loud enough for her to hear, "letting thugs parade like heroes. Next thing you know, they'll be teaching kindergarten." Danielle stopped mid-step. She turned slowly and looked at the man, her voice steady. "They carried my daughter's broken body to the hospital when the ambulance didn't come. What did you do that day?" The man didn't respond. He just turned and shuffled out the door. Danielle's hands trembled, but she stood taller as she walked out behind him. Later that day, she helped Amara into the wheelchair ramp, her daughter more determined now, more curious. They went slowly, Amara clutching the wheels with small, practiced motions, her cast peeking out from under a loose pant leg. At the top of the ramp, a small paper bag waited. No name. Inside, a handmade pink cast cover, soft and stretchy, with butterflies sewn into the fabric. A small note was attached in childlike handwriting. "My daddy said brave girls get butterflies. I made you one. Lena, accept." Amara grinned. "It's so pretty." Danielle felt her chest swell. "Let's put it on." Amara held still while her mother slipped the cover over her cast. When it was snug, Amara held her leg out proudly like she was modeling it. "Do you think Tyler saw the ride?" she asked suddenly. Danielle hesitated. "I don't know." Amara looked up. "I hope he did. I hope he knows I'm not scared of him." Danielle crouched down to meet her daughter's eyes. "You never have to be scared of him again." "I wasn't scared of him," Amara said softly. "I was scared no one would care." Danielle didn't speak. She simply pulled her daughter into a hug, holding her tight. That evening, the school sent out an email blast. New anti-bullying protocols were being enacted immediately. A task force would be created, including teachers, administrators, and parents. Danielle was invited to the first meeting. She didn't know who nominated her. She had a guess. When she arrived, there were 15 people in the room: teachers, a few school board members, a police officer, and to her surprise, the mayor himself, a heavy-set man with tired eyes and a worn suit. "Miss Johnson," he said as he stood to shake her hand, "thank you for coming." Danielle took a seat, clutching a notebook in her lap. The meeting started with statistics, policy proposals, vague mission statements, and then the mayor cleared his throat. "I think it's time we stop pretending this was a one-time event. Miss Johnson, would you be willing to tell us what happened?" Danielle paused, then stood slowly. She didn't look at her notes. "My daughter was pushed down a flight of stairs because she spoke up. Because she said something back to a boy who insulted her for being black and poor and proud of her mother." Zerly, several heads dropped. The room grew quiet. "And when that happened," she continued, "no one stepped in. Not the kids. Not the teachers. Not the neighbors. No one except a group of men this town has whispered about for years. They didn't threaten anyone. They didn't start a fight. They carried my daughter to safety. They built her a ramp. They left flowers and teddy bears. And then they left." She looked at each face. "So before we talk about what we're going to do on paper, I want to know, how many of you have actually talked to the kids doing the bullying?" No one answered. Danielle sat down. She didn't need applause. She didn't need praise. She needed change. That night, Amara slept peacefully. Danielle stood at the window, looking out at Mason Street bathed in the soft glow of the porch light. The flowers at the base of the ramp had started to bloom in uneven patches, wild and untamed, like the truth. Then, faint and distant, she heard it. One engine. Just one. It didn't stop. It didn't slow. But it passed by her house, and the headlight flickered once as if in silent greeting. She pressed her hand to the glass. This time, she didn't feel like she was waiting for something. She felt seen. The paper with the 3 names hadn't moved. Danielle kept it tucked in the back of her dresser drawer, behind a stack of old bills and unused birthday cards. She told herself it didn't mean anything now, not after the hospital, not after the ride, not after the town finally seemed to start listening. But some mornings when Amara was asleep and the world outside was still, Danielle would stand at that drawer and just stare. Tyler, Brandon, Mike. Names that used to mean nothing now hung in her chest like stones. That Thursday afternoon, while picking up Amara's prescription, she saw one of them. Brandon. He stood in line at the corner gas station, earbuds in, slouched and disinterested as always. He hadn't changed, not really. Baggy hoodie, dirty sneakers, chewing gum like he had nothing to answer for. Danielle froze halfway through the automatic door. 100 thoughts rushed through her all at once. Turn around. Ignore him. Say something. Do nothing. Then Brandon looked up and saw her. Their eyes locked, and for a flicker of a second, Danielle saw something she didn't expect. Fear. He looked away, fast. Then he grabbed his snack, paid in silence, and left without a word. Danielle stood there for a long moment, her heart pounding in her ears. She finished her errand, walked back to the car, and sat in the driver's seat for a long time without turning the key. Later that night, she told Duke. She didn't mean to. She'd gone by the garage to drop off a box of thank you cards. Amara had made one for each of the bikers who had visited, plus an extra with glitter and sequins that read, "For the one who always watches." Duke was outside, working on the brake line of a Harley with half its fender missing. He looked up as she approached, wiped his hands on a rag. Danielle set the box down. From Amara. She didn't have to. She wanted to. He nodded once, opened the lid, and looked inside. A small smile tugged at the edge of his mouth. It didn't quite reach his eyes. Danielle hesitated. Then, "I saw one of them today." Duke paused. "Brandon," she said, "at the gas station." He said nothing, just waited. I didn't say anything. He didn't either. But he saw me, and he looked scared. Duke finally spoke, his voice low. "Good." Danielle looked at him. "That's not enough, is it?" "No," he said. "But it's a start." She exhaled. "What happens next?" Duke leaned back against the workbench, crossed his arms. "Nothing public. That's not how it works. But they'll feel it. Every day. That people know. That we saw. That we didn't forget." "Did you ever talk to them?" she asked quietly. "We didn't need to. We asked around, listened. They're not just boys being stupid. They've been allowed to be cruel for too long. Their parents blame the schools. The schools blame the streets. Everyone passes the buck. Mo." He looked at her directly. "But that girl on the ground that was real. And that pain? That's ours now." Danielle nodded, blinking back something sharp behind her eyes. "And what do I do?" she asked. "You live," Duke said. "You raise that girl of yours with everything you've got. You show this town what it means to survive the right way." She didn't say anything else. She just reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper. "The names." She handed it to him. "I don't want to carry it anymore." Duke looked at the paper, then back at her. He didn't open it. Just tucked it into his pocket. Like it was always meant to be there. That night, Danielle didn't hear engines. No late-night drive-bys. No ghostly rumbles down Mason Street. But she did hear something else. Laughter. Amara's. From the next room, reading aloud from one of her books, giggling at a part with a talking frog and a princess who preferred swords over tiaras. Danielle lay back on the couch, her eyes heavy but her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. And somewhere, in a quiet garage at the edge of town, Duke unfolded a small paper under a flickering light. 3 names stared back at him, and he smiled. It began quietly, fittingly, in a town that preferred things to be polite, unspoken, and just beneath the surface. Tyler, Brandon, and Mike were seen less often. The corner of the park where they used to hang out after school now sat empty. The graffiti they once carved into benches had been painted over. Whispers spread through school hallways and staff meetings alike. Something had shifted. Something had reached them, but no one could quite say what. Danielle found out the details from Mrs. Young, the school counselor, when she came to drop off forms for Amara's home instruction. "They're in the community service program now," Mrs. Young said, handing over a packet of math worksheets. "Officially, it's disciplinary. Unofficially, well, it's because someone made some phone calls." Danielle raised an eyebrow. "Someone?" Mrs. Young shrugged, looking toward the hallway. Let's just say a concerned citizen group convinced the district it was the right thing to do. What kind of service? They've been assigned to the Children's Therapy Center on the south side. 3 afternoons a week. They clean. They mop. They carry things. They sit and listen. Daniela blinked. They listen to kids who can't walk, can't talk, or are just starting to trust again. One of the nurses told me she saw Tyler freeze up when a little girl asked him if he was a bad guy. Danielle didn't smile, but her heart settled with quiet satisfaction. Later that evening, she shared the news with Duke. They sat on opposite ends of the diner booth, neutral territory. The walls were covered with old black and white photos of the town's founding families. No one stared at them. Not anymore. So, she said, sipping her coffee, it wasn't you that called the school? Duke buttered a biscuit, never looking up. Nope, just suggested some names. Made sure the right ears were listening. Danielle leaned back. They're working with disabled kids. Duke glanced at her, then at the window. Guilt's a powerful teacher, if they're not numb to it. And if they are? He tore the biscuit in half. Then the town will know. Danielle stirred her coffee in silence. You're not what people say you are. Doesn't matter what they say, he replied. Matters what we do. She looked at him for a moment, then reached into her purse and slid a folded flyer across the table. He opened it, an official invitation from the school district. Community Allies Panel Discussion, addressing bullying, advocacy, and restorative justice. At the bottom, in bold, Key invitee, Duke Harrison, founder, Ride for Respect. Duke stared at it, then raised an eyebrow. They want me to speak? They do, Danielle said. They want both of us. He chuckled. I'm not a speech kind of guy. They're not looking for a speech, she said. They're looking for someone who didn't look away. He folded the flyer slowly and tucked it into his jacket. I'll think about it. That night, Danielle returned home to find Amara asleep on the couch, her pink cast resting on a pillow. The TV was on low cartoons flickering across the screen. Danielle knelt beside her and gently turned down the volume. Amara stirred. Mama? Hey, baby, Danielle whispered. You fell asleep out here. I was waiting, Amara said drowsily. Thought I'd hear the bikes again. Danielle smiled softly. They're probably sleeping too. Amara's eyes closed. I like them. I know. Do you think they like me? Danielle kissed her forehead. I think they ride for you. Outside, a breeze rustled through the wildflowers by the ramp. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. And far off in the night, as Danielle sat beside her daughter, the faintest echo of a motorcycle passed through the edge of town like a guardian making rounds, not to be seen, just to remind the dark it wasn't alone. The gymnasium at Mason Ridge Elementary hadn't seen this many folding chairs since the mayor's pancake fundraiser 3 years ago. But tonight wasn't about breakfast or politics. It was about what happens when a town chooses not to look away. Danielle sat in the front row, her hands resting on her knees, eyes scanning the crowd, parents, teachers, a few students, some familiar faces, some who had avoided her in the grocery store just weeks earlier. Even the superintendent sat stiffly near the podium, flipping through prepared notes like he was hoping to memorize them in time. Duke wasn't there yet, and that made her nervous. The event had been promoted as a Community Allies Forum, but everyone knew why they were really there. The incident, the child, the ride, the men in leather, the fact that a little girl's scream had forced a community to confront the silence they'd all lived inside for too long. Danielle looked down at her note cards, though she didn't really need them. Her speech wasn't crafted, it was carried. Then the gym doors opened. Heads turned. Boots echoed across the hardwood floor. Duke walked in wearing his usual denim vest, a simple black shirt underneath, jeans worn to a faded gray, and an American flag patch stitched on one shoulder. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just gave a nod and found his seat next to Danielle. Cutting it close, she murmured. Had to fix a brake line, he said calmly. Can't have riders crashing on the way to church. Danielle shook her head, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. The moderator, a social worker from the county, introduced the panel. A few local activists, a school psychologist, and then Danielle Johnson, parent and advocate for safer schools, and Mr. Duke Harrison, founder of Ride for Respect. Danielle was invited to speak first. She stood slowly, note cards in hand, though her fingers never used them. "My name is Danielle Johnson. You all know what happened to my daughter, Amara. You know what it did to her body. What you don't know is what it did to her spirit. You didn't hear the way she asked me, 3 days later. Did I deserve it?" The silence was immediate and sharp. "I didn't come here tonight for sympathy. I came here to say this. The only reason Amara is healing is because someone stepped in when no one else would. Not a teacher, not a neighbor, not a friend. Strangers. Men most of us were told to stay away from." She paused. "I stayed away too, until I didn't. And," Danielle set her cards down, "you don't have to like them, but you should know them, because when the ambulance didn't come, they did." She sat down. There was no applause. Not yet, only stillness. Duke stood next. He didn't have cards. He just walked to the mic, took one long look around, and said, "I've seen a lot of pain in my life, been the cause of some of it. But I know what cowardice looks like. And it doesn't wear a leather vest. It wears silence. It wears shrugs. It wears a tight-lipped excuse when a child gets hurt and no one stands up." He leaned forward just slightly. "We didn't ride for attention. We rode because that little girl reminded us of who we forgot to be." And then he stepped down. It wasn't a speech. It was a reckoning. The applause started slow, 1 or 2 hands. Then it grew, loud, sustained, not for drama, but relief. Afterward, people approached Danielle and Duke like something had shifted. A few parents thanked her. A guidance counselor asked for resources. Even the superintendent mumbled something about policy review. But the moment that stayed with her came when she stepped outside. A boy stood near the flagpole, maybe 13, skinny, shoulders hunched. He looked like he wanted to disappear into his own hoodie. "Miss Johnson?" he asked. "Yes? I saw it happen. That day with your daughter." Danielle's breath caught. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I wanted to, but I was scared." "No." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what he wasn't saying. That he'd carried it. That it hadn't left him either. "You see her at school?" He nodded. Danielle stepped closer. "Then start with hello. Make her feel seen. That's more than most adults did." He nodded again, eyes glossy, and walked off into the dark. Duke was leaning against his bike when she reached the parking lot. "Ready to roll?" he asked. Danielle smirked. "You're not driving me home." No," he said, starting the engine, "but I'll follow close." The roar filled the night, but this time it didn't shake the town. It steadied it. Monday morning arrived with a new kind of silence. Not the uneasy hush that used to hang over Danielle's mornings like fog. No, this was different. It was the stillness of anticipation, of holding your breath before something big. Amara was going back to school. She sat at the edge of the bed, her backpack resting beside her wheelchair. Her cast had been signed by everyone in the hospital. Each scribble of ink a strange badge of honor. She wore a pink hoodie and her favorite jeans, the left leg cut open and stitched back together to fit over the cast. On the front pocket, a small butterfly pin glittered in the morning sunday. "You ready?" Danielle asked, brushing down a flyaway curl from her daughter's temple. Amara shrugged. "My stomach feels funny." "Like butterflies?" "Like thunder." Danielle smiled, her heart aching. "Well, even thunder makes the sky cleaner after." Amara didn't answer, but she nodded. The school had arranged for a special aide to meet them out front. Danielle drove slowly, parking near the ramp by the east entrance, the one Duke had helped advocate for after the board meeting. Kids turned to stare. Some of the older ones whispered. Danielle held Amara's hand a little tighter. And then a second grader, small, red-haired, holding a lunchbox covered in superhero stickers, stepped forward and said, "Hey, Amara, cool wheels." Amara blinked. "Thanks." That was all. But it was enough. The aide appeared at the door, smiling gently, and guided Amara inside. Danielle watched until her daughter disappeared through the doors, then exhaled slowly and returned to her car. She didn't drive away right away. She just Saturday watching. She thought about the panel discussion, the folded chairs, the boy by the flagpole, the quiet boy who had once been too afraid to speak, but had spoken anyway. Then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Southside Center. 3 p.m. today. You might want to see this. D.H. Danielle stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she texted back, I'll be there. The Southside Children's Therapy Center was tucked behind a medical plaza, unassuming, clean, and painted in soft shades of yellow and blue. Danielle arrived 10 minutes early and sat in her car again, watching. At 2:59, Duke pulled in on his bike. He didn't dismount, just nodded toward the glass double doors. Danielle got out and walked inside. The lobby smelled of crayons and disinfectant. A group of volunteers were wiping down toys and sorting books. And in the far corner, near the art wall, stood 3 boys in matching gray volunteer t-shirts. Tyler, Brandon, Mike. She knew them instantly. They weren't laughing. They weren't lounging. They were scrubbing paint trays, sorting crayons back into boxes, carefully taping edges of drawings that kids had torn in frustration. A staff member, clipboard in hand, walked past her and smiled. You here to observe? Danielle nodded. They're doing okay, the woman said. Quiet, a little stiff, but they're on time, and they haven't complained once. One of them even helped a boy fix his paper plane. Lo. Danielle stood behind the glass divider and watched as Mike knelt beside a little girl with a leg brace and helped her fold colored paper. The girl giggled. Tyler glanced over at Danielle just for a second and looked away immediately. Not shame, not pride, just awareness. They knew she was there, and they were still working. When Danielle stepped outside again, Duke was still on his bike, engine off, chewing a toothpick like he was keeping his thoughts to himself. Well, he asked. They're doing the work. That's the point, he said. No lectures, no speeches, just let 'em feel it. Danielle leaned against his handlebars. You believe in redemption? I believe in chances, he said. What they do with them, that's not on me. She looked at him, thoughtful. You ever wish someone had done this for you, when you were their age? He didn't answer right away. Then, every day. They didn't talk much after that. Danielle returned to the hospital to deliver a thank you letter to one of the nurses, and Duke rode off toward the edge of town, dust trailing in his wake.